Imagine opening your electricity bill at the end of the month and seeing a number so absurd that it looks like you're powering an entire rave, strobe lights, blasting speakers, the whole deal. But there's no party. It's just your hard-earned, honestly paid energy being sucked away by a shameless neighbor. Her name? Vanessa Brooks, the queen of audacity. And for what? To power an obnoxiously loud electric ATV that she parades around the neighborhood like she owns the place, zooming through the streets with that irritating hum that makes even the dogs of Sunny Hills Estates howl in frustration. This isn't some made-up nightmare meant to scare you. It actually happened to me. I'm Ethan Carter, an electrical engineer, the guy who can tell an amp from an ohm and never thought he'd have to use that knowledge to wage war against an energy thief. When I realized my meter was spinning faster than a helicopter blade, I didn't just sit back and take it. I built smart circuits to track the theft, set up a few electrifying surprises that would make anyone think twice before messing with what isn't theirs, and even rallied an entire neighborhood that was already fed up with Vanessa's nonsense. What started as a spike in my bill turned into a high-voltage battle straight out of a movie. Me versus her, amperage versus audacity, and one clever plan that fried her scheme like a poorly wired circuit. In the end, it wasn't just Vanessa who got shocked. The entire Sunny Hills Estates lit up in an electrical revolution. Want to know how I turned a blatant theft into an epic spectacle of justice, complete with sparks flying and neighbors cheering? Then plug in, hit play, and follow along, because this story has more energy than an overloaded transformer and will electrify you from start to finish. Let's rewind this tape back to the start of the story. I live in Sunny Hills Estates, a suburban community on the outskirts of Seattle that looks straight out of a 1950s TV commercial. Lush green lawns so perfect they seem fake, houses lined up like toy soldiers, and a peaceful quiet that even the birds respect, singing only in hushed tones. It's the kind of place where you expect the biggest neighborhood drama to be someone forgetting to pick up their newspaper from the porch. I'm Ethan Carter, an electrical engineer, and my house here is more than just a roof over my head. It's my lab, my fortress, my testing ground. On the roof I have solar panels gleaming like futuristic mirrors, capturing every ray of sunlight the gray Seattle sky decides to send my way. In the basement, I have a backup battery I built with care, purring softly like a satisfied cat, ready to save me from any blackout. And the meter. That's my pride and joy. I customized it from scratch, with sensors I soldered myself to monitor every watt that comes in and out. It's my sanctuary, my domain. I control every electron like a maestro conducting an orchestra. But about 3 months ago, my paradise started to crack, and I had no idea why. My electric bill, which always landed neatly at $80, a round number that gave me a strange sense of pride, suddenly started climbing like it had a mind of its own. First, $110. All right, I thought, maybe it's just a utility rate adjustment. The next month, $130. That was too much to ignore. I wasn't doing anything different. No AC humming through the humid summer, no Christmas lights flashing out of season, not even an extra phone charger plugged in. My life was the same, but my bill was behaving like a reckless teenager on a shopping spree. So I decided to investigate. I turned to my monitor, the smart meter I treat like my own child, and started digging into the data. That's when the mystery took shape. Every single night between midnight and 3 a.m. there was a strange surge of 3 kilowatts, 3 kilowatts per hour. That's enough to power an industrial refrigerator, the kind that holds half a cow. And I only had a regular fridge in my kitchen, barely big enough for my beers and leftover pizza. Something was very wrong in Sunny Hills Estates, and I, the guy who masters electrons, wasn't going to let it slide. I spent days frying my brain over this, like an overloaded circuit. I became a possessed man, the kind you see in movies, messing with wires, dark circles under his eyes, a cup of coffee in hand. First, I grabbed my multimeter, my trusty sidekick, and tested the solar panels, climbing onto the roof under Seattle's grumpy sky. The results? 100% efficiency, shining as always, not a single drop of energy wasted. I went down to the basement and checked my backup battery, crawling through cobwebs and the metallic smell of damp wires. No leaks, no failures, everything sealed tight like a vault. Still unsatisfied, I went even deeper. I shut off every single device in the house one by one, like a mad scientist hunting for the truth. Lights off, fridge unplugged, even the Wi-Fi router went dark. I ended up sitting in the pitch black, flashlight in hand, my coffee cold enough to be a chemistry experiment, and the meter still showing that cursed surge. Nothing made sense. Then one night, as the wind howled against my window like it was trying to tell me something, it hit me. This wasn't a technical failure, it was outright theft. Someone was draining my electricity like a freeloader raiding a shared fridge. My suspicion struck like lightning. Vanessa Brooks, the new neighbor at 47B. She had moved into Sunny Hills Estates a few months ago, bringing her son, Tyler, and a storm of chaos no one had asked for. Vanessa isn't the kind of person who could go unnoticed even if she tried. Sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, shiny leggings that reflect light like a disco ball, and the energy of someone who believes the world is her stage. Every day, she sets up a makeshift studio in her backyard to record Instagram stories. Studio lights so bright they could belong on a Hollywood set, a ridiculous decorative fountain that spits out colored water like a theme park, and a plastic smile you can see from my window. Then there's Tyler, her 16-year-old son, the real terror on wheels. The kid rides an electric ATV that sounds like a retired tank, loud as a tractor with a busted exhaust, flashing red and blue LED lights that turn the neighborhood into a rolling nightclub. I'd seen him zooming through the streets, tearing up the perfectly manicured lawns, and nearly sending Mrs. Jenkins' mailbox into orbit. She screamed so loud I thought she'd call the cops. That duo was a walking, talking spectacle, and every watt of their show screamed electricity. Slowly, the truth sank in. It wasn't just about showing off. It was my power funding their circus. It was time to catch them in the act. I wasn't going to let this mystery fry my peace for another night. I grabbed my multimeter, my trusty war buddy, a cold white flashlight that cut through the darkness like a knife, and an old jacket to keep from freezing in Seattle's crisp night air. I stepped into my backyard, where my weathered but sturdy wooden fence separated my lot from Vanessa's. There, leaning against the fence, was an outdoor power outlet I had installed for my tools, the electric lawnmower that kept my grass pristine, a portable drill that had saved me in 1,000 projects. As I shone the flashlight closer, I spotted the first clue. The plug in the outlet was slightly twisted, halfway out of place, like someone had yanked it in a hurry. Then my eyes dropped to the ground, fresh dirt marks scattered around with messy scuff marks like someone had tried to erase their tracks. This wasn't the work of a squirrel or the wind. It was human, careless, and bold. My engineers' instinct lit up like a red warning LED. It wasn't enough to suspect. I needed numbers, facts, proof that not even Vanessa could deny with that Instagram smile of hers. I went home and set up a test worthy of a high-voltage lab. I shut down all the internal circuits. The lights died with a click. The fridge stopped purring. Even the router's hum vanished. Total silence, except for the faint crackling of my anticipation. I left only the external outlet on, an irresistible bait, and set up my smart meter to record every milliwatt that dared to pass through it. A true digital spy. I went to bed, but sleep, not a chance. I lay there in the dark, tablet in hand, eyes glued to the screen like a night watchman waiting for a thief to strike. The wind outside rattled the windows, but my mind was elsewhere, on the numbers that would expose the culprit. At dawn, with the sun barely peeking through the grey clouds, I opened the meter logs. And there it was, carved in digital stone like a confession. 2:17 a.m., a spike of 3.2 kilowatts, 3.2 kilowatts per hour. That was more energy than my electric heater pulled on the coldest winter days. This wasn't some forgotten phone charger or a stray nightlight. This was something big, greedy, blatant. At that moment, I could almost hear the roar of Tyler's damn ATV in my head, its LED lights flashing like a taunt. Someone had plugged in an energy-hungry monster to my outlet, and I didn't need an oscilloscope to figure out who was behind. Vanessa Brooks, brace yourself. The engineer has the data in hand and patience running on fumes. I wasn't about to let this proof cool off on my tablet like a forgotten cup of coffee. I went straight to Vanessa's house, blood pounding. In my ears, the meter's numbers burning in my mind. It was around 10 a.m., Seattle's lazy sun trying to break through the clouds. And there I was at 47B, finger on the doorbell like it was a missile launch button. The door opened, and there she was, Vanessa Brooks, in the flesh, wrapped in a pink silk robe that practically screamed, "I'm chic even in pajamas," sunglasses perched on her head like a diva's tiara, and an iced coffee in hand, sipping through a striped straw at an infuriatingly relaxed pace. "Ethan, what a surprise!" Her voice was syrupy, almost sing-song like I was some fan showing up for an autograph. "Everything okay?" She tilted her head, feigning concern, but that little smirk at the corner of her mouth gave her away. She knew damn well I wasn't there to offer cookies. I took a deep breath, swallowed the urge to launch into a lecture about milliwatts and ethics, and went straight to the point. "Vanessa, did you or Tyler use my external outlet last night?" Half a second of silence. Then she blinked, threw her head back and let out a laugh so exaggerated it felt rehearsed, like a soap opera villain caught with her hand in the safe. "You're joking, right? Oh my God, Ethan, what an imagination!" She waved her free, hand dismissively like shooing away a fly. "We can't even jump that fence. Tyler barely gets off the couch to get a glass of water, let alone climb wood in the middle of the night. You're seeing things where there's nothing, neighbor." Her tone dripped with mockery, every word soaked in condescension, and that neighbor at the end felt like a patronizing pat on the head. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, the slight tremor in the straw as she took another sip. Vanessa might be good at recording Instagram stories, but as an improv actress, a disaster. And I, the engineer with the logs in hand, wasn't buying this second-rate performance. I wasn't there to play guessing games or swallow half-baked stories. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone like a gunslinger in a duel, and turned, the screen toward her like it was an arrest warrant. "Look at this, Vanessa. 2:17 a.m. 3.2 kWh recorded straight from my external outlet. This isn't an error, it's not a squirrel, it's pure and simple theft." The numbers glowed on the screen, cold and undeniable, like an X-ray exposing her lie. Her laugh died instantly, choking in midair, and for a second I saw panic flicker in her eyes, a short circuit in her untouchable diva persona. But Vanessa wasn't one to surrender easily. She squared her shoulders, forced a twisted smile that looked more like a grimace, and gave me a light, condescending pat on the shoulder as if I were a kid throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. "Relax, Ethan," she drawled, stretching out, the words like she thought she could smooth over the world. "It was probably a squirrel messing with the wires, or maybe some bored neighbor with too much time on their hands. It's just a little bit of electricity, not the end of the world." Her little bit was nearly $50 a month out of my pocket, but she tossed the line like I was the petty one for caring. Before I could fire back with the logic of an engineer or the fury of a screwed-over neighbor, she spun on her heel, her pink robe billowing like a villain's cape, and disappeared inside. The door slammed shut in my face with a sharp thud, the sound echoing in the quiet morning of Sunny Hills Estates. I stood there on her porch, phone still warm in my hand, blood boiling and one certainty electrifying my nerves. Vanessa could close the door, but this story was far from over. I stayed planted on her porch, the echo of the door slam buzzing in my ears, my blood rising like an overloaded circuit. "Just a little electricity," she said. Little. This wasn't a forgotten lamp or an idle fan. It was my money slipping into her pocket, my system being invaded like a child's toy, my patience burning up like a blown fuse. Vanessa thought I was an idiot, figured I'd swallow that squirrel in the wires nonsense and slink back home with my tail between my legs. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I'm not some guy who just flips a switch and prays the light turns on. I'm Ethan Carter, the guy who's designed electrical grids for data centers that keep terabytes flying without a blink. Systems that don't crash even when a Category 5 hurricane is roaring outside. I've spent sleepless nights calculating loads, soldering circuits, taming amperages that would make Tyler cry for his mommy. If Vanessa wanted to play with electricity, thinking she could fool me with a smile and a pat on the shoulder, she was in for a private lesson with the professor. And I guarantee the reality check was going to be high voltage. Enough with the small talk. I was going to catch Vanessa red-handed, and I was going to do it in style. I decided to set a trap that combined science with a slap in the face for anyone who thought they could make a fool out of me. I built a baited outlet. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary outdoor socket, the kind anyone would plug into without a second thought. But inside, a surge circuit I designed from scratch, precisely calibrated to trigger if the current exceeded 5 amps. Anything greedier than that, like say the charger of a noisy electric ATV, would get a shocking reality check. The surge would fry the device on the spot. No mercy, no warning. To test it, I dug out an old blender my mom had left at my place, a relic from the 80s with yellowed buttons and a motor that had been wheezing long before it died. I plugged it into the bait, counted to 10, and the show began. Smoke curled lazily into the air, the smell of burning plastic filled the room, and the motor let out one final whine like a cry of defeat. Rest in peace, blender. Your death was almost poetic, a sacrifice in the name of electrical justice. With the test approved, I took my masterpiece to the backyard. I installed the baited outlet on the wooden fence, right where the original cable had been tampered with, and set the stage carefully. I left a fake cable hanging loose, slightly crooked and poorly fitted, as if I were a careless neighbor who didn't notice a dangling wire. It was the perfect bait, irresistible for someone who was already used to helping themselves to my electricity like it was a free buffet. I went back inside, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark with a beer in hand, my tablet beside me displaying the meter in real time. The stage was set, the circuit was ready, and me, I was just waiting for the show to begin. Something told me Vanessa and Tyler were about to bring the fireworks without even knowing it. 3 nights later, the stage was set, and I was the director of this electric opera. I was glued to the living room window, the curtains slightly open, a mug of hot coffee burning my hands as steam curled into the cold Seattle air. The tablet rested on the windowsill, the meter running in real time, every milliwatt under my control. The clock read 2:23 a.m. when the silence of Sunny Hills Estates shattered into pieces. A blue flash sliced through the backyard like an off-schedule lightning bolt, so bright that for a second I thought the sky had revolted. Then came a sharp crack, a backyard thunderclap that echoed off the fences, silencing even the crickets. And then the grand finale. Vanessa's shrill, hysterical voice tore through the night. "Tyler, what did you do to the ATV?" That was my cue. I rushed to the window, nearly spilling my coffee, pressing my nose against the glass to witness the spectacle I had scripted. There it was, Tyler's pride and joy, that ridiculous electric ATV, now reduced to a smoking carcass. Thick black smoke curled into the air as if the thing had turned into barbecue, while its LED lights flickered in distress. Red, blue, like a nightclub having a nervous breakdown. The motor hissed and gurgled, a pathetic sound, like a wounded animal begging for mercy. And Tyler? The kid stood in the middle of it all, a scrawny figure in Spider-Man pajamas, his hair a mess from jumping out of bed to do something stupid. In his hands was the charger, or what was left of it, melted into a misshapen lump of plastic and exposed wires, still trailing a faint wisp of smoke as if to say, "I tried." He stared at the ATV, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, the face of someone who had just lost his best friend to a war he didn't understand. Meanwhile, Vanessa burst through the back door, her pink robe billowing in the wind, shouting something lost in the ATV's dying whine. I leaned back against the window, coffee still warm in my hand, a smirk creeping onto my face. Lesson taught. Professor Vanessa and student Tyler had just learned that electricity isn't a toy. I was laughing so hard my coffee nearly turned into a waterfall on the living room floor. The tablet was still flashing the meter's numbers, but who needed data now? The live show in the backyard was better than any log. Vanessa stormed onto the back porch like a hurricane in human form, disheveled, her blonde hair looking like a bird's nest after a windstorm, her pink robe half open, revealing an old yogurt brand promotional t-shirt. In one hand she clutched a cheap flashlight that trembled as she aimed it at Tyler, screaming as if he had set the house on fire. "This is your fault, Tyler. What did you do to my backyard? The kid, still clutching the melted charger, his Spider-Man pajamas now covered in dirt, lifted his head in shock, his voice coming out choked. Mom, you told me to plug it in here. You said it was free. Time stopped. Vanessa froze mid-scream, the flashlight dangling in her hand as if she had forgotten how to hold it. Her eyes shot to my window, and there I was, leaning against the glass with my coffee in hand and a grin that couldn't be contained. I raised my mug in a silent checkmate. Her face was a masterpiece, lips pressed into a tight line, nose scrunched, eyes narrowed as if she had just swallowed a lemon and discovered it was electric. The flashlight's beam fell to the ground, illuminating the smoking ATV like a tragicomic stage spotlight. Tyler was still staring at his mother, waiting for an explanation that wasn't coming, while the motor let out its final dying wheeze. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it again, then turned her back on her son, marching into the house as if she could erase his confession with a firm step. I collapsed onto the couch, legs shaking from laughter, coffee now lukewarm in my hand. It was the best show of the season at Sunny Hills Estates. The next morning, the sun had barely risen over Seattle when I heard pounding on the door, like a SWAT team was raiding the place. It was 8 a.m. and I was still on my first sip of coffee, trying to process the glory of the previous night. I opened the door and there she was, Vanessa Brooks, a walking hurricane of rage, dressed like she had looted an 80s gym thrift store. Gold leggings that shone brighter than my solar panels, an oversized sweatshirt that swallowed her shoulders, and read "Good Vibes Only" in huge letters. Pure irony, considering the volcano she was about to erupt. Her hair was pulled into a lopsided ponytail, her sunglasses slipping down her forehead, and her eyes sparkled with fury, as if I had personally fried the ATV with my bare hands. You sabotaged my son's ATV, Ethan. Her voice was loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. This is a crime. I'm going to sue you until you have to sell this house and beg for mercy. I kept my cool, leaning against the doorframe like someone watching a show they already knew the ending to. Arms crossed, coffee still hot in my hand, I let her vent while silently counting down the seconds to the perfect response. I don't know what you're talking about, Vanessa, I said, my tone so calm it could have been mistaken for a guided meditation. But if someone decided to use my external outlet without permission, plugging in an energy monster that couldn't handle a basic circuit, well, maybe they just learned a lesson about private property and consequences. I paused, letting the words sink in, then took a sip of my coffee like it was a period at the end of a sentence. Her face turned as red as a ripe chili pepper, pulsing with rage. She jabbed a finger into my chest so hard I almost felt her chipped nail scratching my shirt. You'll see, Ethan, she shouted, her voice climbing an octave with every syllable. I'm calling the HOA, I'm gathering the neighbors, and I'm shutting down this nonsense you call justice. She spun on her heel, her gold leggings reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of fury, and stormed down the street, leaving a trail of threats echoing all the way to the corner. I closed the door, the smile creeping back onto my face. If she wanted a war, so be it. My meter and I had already won the first battle. Vanessa stomped down the street, her flip-flops smacking against the asphalt like tiny thunderclaps of indignation, her messy ponytail bouncing with every furious step. I stood in the doorway, coffee still in hand, and thought, bring the drama, Vanessa. I've got more up my sleeve and my circuits are fully charged. Peace didn't last long. By afternoon, the sun was starting to dip into Seattle's gray sky, when I heard a hesitant knock at the door, nothing like the morning's rage-fueled attack. It was Greg, the manager of Sunny Hills Estates, a man in his 50s who always seemed 2 steps away from retirement. Faded blue polo shirt, wrinkled, khaki pants, and an expression that said he'd rather be sinking into a golf course with a cold beer than stuck in the middle of a neighbor dispute. Ethan, he said, voice dragging like he'd already repeated this speech 1,000 times, explain this explosive outlet story to me. Vanessa's been in the office for an hour, saying you're endangering the neighborhood, that you're a public menace, practically an electrical terrorist. I didn't even blink. I grabbed my tablet from the couch, pulled up the meter logs with the composure of a lawyer presenting evidence in court, and turned the screen toward him. Here, Greg. 3.2 kilowatts, 2:17 a.m., straight from my external outlet. This isn't a squirrel, it's not a malfunction. It's theft, plain and simple. She's been siphoning my power, trespassing on my property, and all I did was defend myself with a basic circuit any decent engineer could build. The numbers glowed on the screen, cold, undeniable. I gestured toward the yard to drive the point home. Greg scratched his graying beard, his eyes rolling toward the sky as if praying for a miracle, or at least a hole to disappear into. He let out a deep sigh, the kind weighed down by years of boring HOA meetings, and said, "Look, Ethan, I'm not a detective. I can't prove who's right or wrong in this mess. Just do me a favor. I don't want firefighters here, no cops, no local news poking around. Handle this between yourselves, please." He turned away, dragging his feet along the stone path, his polo shirt swaying like a flag of surrender. I shut the door and leaned against it, tablet still in hand. Greg could wash his hands of this, but I knew the game was far from over. Vanessa wouldn't just swallow a fried ATV and a lecture from the HOA manager like a pat on the back. She'd double down, bring more drama, maybe even gather signatures to paint me as the villain. And me? I'd triple down. I had circuits to build, data to collect, and a whole neighborhood that sooner or later would see who was really in the right in this voltage war. Let the next round come, I was ready to turn on the lights and shut hers off. I was done with games and lousy excuses. I needed evidence so solid that not even Vanessa, with all her Instagram diva attitude, could deny it. It was time to level up. I grabbed my drone, a smart little thing with a 4K camera that I used to map energy projects in tricky terrains, a true engineer's toy that had saved me hours of manual work. I charged the battery, calibrated the controls, and took it to the backyard, the buzzing of the propellers cutting through the afternoon silence like a warning that the game was about to change. The plan was simple, but genius. Fly low, right, along the fence and hunt down her cables like a hawk tracking its prey. I set the altitude to about 6 feet, keeping the drone discreet in the shadows of the trees, and let the 4K camera do the heavy lifting. The images started popping up on my tablet, sharp as a sunbeam in high definition, and what I saw made me let out a loud, "Holy crap," that almost made me drop the controller. There it was, a thick, bright orange cable shamelessly slithering out of Vanessa's backyard like an electric snake. It twisted around a poorly trimmed bush trying to blend in, and went straight into my bait outlet, plugged in with all the subtlety of an elephant in a china shop. But things ran deeper, much deeper. The camera turned, and I spotted a thinner, green cable snaking across the lawn like a runaway worm, stretching 2 houses down to the backyard of Mia Torres, the retired teacher who hardly ever leaves her home. And it didn't stop there. A black cable, half hidden under a loose layer of dirt, slithered all the way to Jay Patel's utility pole, the guy on the corner who spends his days fixing motorcycles in his yard. My jaw dropped. Vanessa wasn't just a petty electricity thief. She had set up an entire power stealing network, straight out of a 90s heist movie, complete with colorful cables and an audacity that bordered on the ridiculous. I wasn't dealing with some amateur. Vanessa was the Bonnie without Clyde of Sunny Hills Estates, and she had turned the neighborhood into an all-you-can-eat buffet of stolen watts. I went to talk to Mia first. She's a chef, and her outdoor kitchen looks like something out of a cooking show, with a portable fridge, LED lights blinking like an off-season Christmas display, and an electric oven that purrs like a satisfied cat. I knocked on her door, drone still in hand, its buzzing still echoing in my head after hours of tracking evidence. "Mia, is your fridge shutting off at night?" Her eyes widened, mascara almost jumping off her lashes. "Yes, for weeks now. I've been losing food every night. Chocolate ganache cake that took me 3 hours to make, marinated meat for Saturday's dinner. Everything turns into a graveyard of spoiled food." "I thought this damn fridge was broken." I showed her the drone footage. A thin green cable, sneaky as a snake, slithering out from her bushes and vanishing into who knows where. She turned as pale as raw dough, her apron trembling in her hands. "That woman is stealing from me. I swear I'll rip her hair out strand by strand and use it to season my next stew." Mia was already reaching for a kitchen knife, the kind that slices through bone. and I had to hold the door shut to keep her from charging into the neighborhood on a warpath. Next up was Jay Patel, a retired guy who lives for cable TV and football like it's a religion. He opened the door with a remote in his hand, fingers calloused from endless channel surfing, and a grumpy look that screamed, "If you're selling something, just turn around now." The smell of burnt popcorn wafted from inside, and his TV blared a Seahawks replay at full volume. "Jay, do your lights flicker at 2 a.m.? He huffed, his nose scrunching up like I had just insulted his team. "Damn right they do, and my DVR already lost 3 Seahawks games. 3! There was a historic touchdown against the 49ers I'll never get to see because of this crap. The power company said it was normal. Normal, my ass." I showed him the footage of the thick black cable wrapped around his pole like an electric python. His eyes narrowed, the remote nearly crushed in his grip. "This is sabotage. Someone's messing with my football to drive me insane. I'm going to find out who it is and make them swallow this cable. With mustard." He was already slipping, on his worn-out flip-flops and grabbing a flashlight, ready to become a middle-aged detective in the dead of night. I invited Mia J. Sarah, who records podcasts in her attic and has lost entire episodes due to power outages frying her condenser microphone, and Mike, a gardener obsessed with backyard electric fountains that look like they belong in a luxury resort, for a barbecue on my porch. But it wasn't just about eating meat and drinking beer, it was a strategic ambush. I set up a whiteboard on the wall, straight out of a noir detective movie. Meter logs with suspicious spikes, grainy drone photos showing illegal cables, red lines connecting houses like a crime map. I had practically become the Sherlock Holmes of the neighborhood. Mia arrived with a tray of smoked ribs and a murderous look in her eyes. Jay brought a box of warm beer and a notebook full of curses aimed at the power company. Sarah carried a laptop with headphones hanging around her neck, and Mike showed up with a shovel in hand, just in case. Sarah dropped the bomb first. She had accidentally recorded audio while testing a directional microphone in her attic. It was Vanessa's unmistakable voice at a backyard party, laughing loudly with a drink in her hand. "These suckers don't even notice I get free electricity. I could power the whole neighborhood, and they'd still be the ones paying the bill." There was about 3 seconds of silence before chaos erupted. Mike slammed the table, nearly knocking over the sausages. "She's running my cascading LED fountain, and I'm the one paying? That's Oscar-worthy theft. She deserves a damn statue." Mia was already sharpening a spatula in the corner, muttering something about making stew out of Vanessa's remains, while Jay shouted that he was going to sue everyone, including the power company, for complicity. It was a full-blown scheme, and we dismantled it like taking apart a broken toy. Tyler's quad bike, that 15-year-old kid who thinks he's a rally driver, was pulling about 800 watts per charge, enough to leave Jay without his Seahawks replays. But there was more, much more. Studio lights for Instagram stories that blinded passers-by, a decorative fountain changing colors like a psychedelic rainbow, even a backyard projector screening terrible movies on a loop. The entire neighborhood had been funding Vanessa's circus, and she still had the audacity to offer us lemonade on Saturday afternoons, like she was some kind of model neighbor. We had had enough of the flickering lights, the dead refrigerators, the cut-off podcasts, and the dried-up fountains. The barbecue turned into an impromptu tribunal. Mia wanted justice with a knife in hand. Jay just wanted his DVR to work. Sarah wanted revenge in HD audio, and Mike just wanted his electric bill back to normal. Vanessa had no idea, but the noose was tightening around her. We decided to fight back like an elite squad, the kind from action movies, but with fewer grenades and more electrical creativity. I installed bait outlets in 5 houses: mine, Mia's, Jay's, Sarah's, and Mike's. Each one was equipped with my surge circuit, 5 amps of pure revenge, enough to fry anything plugged into it, and hidden cameras tucked into old birdhouses I had lying around from a failed bird-watching project. I set up a smart monitor that sent alerts to my phone and theirs like a high-end shopping mall security system, flashing lights, sirens, the whole deal. Sarah, always with a flair for drama, suggested using her audio as extra evidence. "Let's do a special podcast called The Fall of the Energy Queen, Jay. his eyes gleaming as if he had finally seen a light at the end of the Seahawks tunnel. Had a genius idea. If she tries it again, we'll film her reaction in real time and drop it in the neighborhood group chat. It's going to be the touchdown of the season. Mia just laughed, twirling a wooden spoon. I can't wait to see her face when the circus burns down. We spent the night setting everything up, a mix of a clandestine workshop and a backyard party. I tested a surge in my garage with an old fan that wheezed more than it spun, plugged it into the bait outlet, and in 8 seconds it screeched like a possessed kettle, spun wildly as if about to take off, and died with a pathetic whimper, letting out a dramatic spark. Mia gave it, a standing ovation, her eyes shining. This is art, Ethan. Art with a burnt smell. Not wanting to be left out, Mike brought in a broken charger from one of his fountains to test. He plugged it in, and in 3 seconds, a cloud of smoke rose, the plastic melting into a horrid stench. He punched the air, shouting, "Now that's how it's done. Vanessa, better watch out." Jay adjusted the cameras with the remote still in his hand, as if he could operate everything with telekinesis, while Sarah narrated the process into her recorder, just in case. We were ready. The whole neighborhood had become an electrical battlefield, and we were the generals. On Wednesday at 1:49 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. A surge on Mia's bait outlet. I opened the live feed in the dark of my room, my heart pounding like I was a spy in a thriller. There he was, Tyler, the teenage quad bike racer, jumping Mia's fence with the orange cable in hand, his hair messy and his expression full of smug confidence. He plugged it into the bait outlet, and then, blinding blue flash, a loud crack like a miniature thunderclap, smoke rising like a tiny backyard volcano. The kid screamed like he had seen a ghost, fell backward onto the wet grass and rolled around, frantically trying to put out invisible sparks. Vanessa ran out onto the porch in a hot pink robe, her hair in rollers, her voice hoarse from waking up to the worst nightmare. "This is sabotage. I'm gonna sue you all, you miserables." But she wasn't ready for the perfect camera angle. The orange cable hanging loose, the quad bike charger sizzling with a sad hissing sound, and Tyler cursing his mom, his dad, and even the dog while slapping his pajama to put out the smoke. It was an Oscar-worthy moment, comedy and crime all rolled into one. We took the evidence to Greg at the Sunny Hills Estates office the next morning, an irrefutable package. The 4K video capturing every detail in razor-sharp clarity, the meter logs with timestamps that looked like a NASA report, the audio of Vanessa bragging at the party like a cheap soap opera villain. Greg, a guy who usually only dealt with complaints about overgrown lawns, turned pale as paper, his glasses slipping down his nose as he watched the video. "This is way out of my league, guys. This is police business." He called Pacific Power right away, his hands trembling on the phone. A technician showed up the next day, a guy in an orange jumpsuit with a multimeter in hand, who tracked the illegal cables like a treasure hunter. The verdict: Vanessa had siphoned off $7,800 in electricity from 7 houses over the course of months, a mastermind scheme that was costing everyone. She was slapped with a $19,000 fine from the power company, ordered to pay for repairs on all the fried connections, and banned from community events for a year. Goodbye barbecues, Christmas parties, and even the charity bingo nights. Tyler's ATV became a sad wreck in the yard, covered by a grey tarp that flapped in the wind like a flag of defeat. That night, Mia baked a celebration cake. Jay finally watched a Seahawks game without interruption. Sarah launched her victory podcast, and Mike turned on every single fountain in his yard just to rub it in Vanessa's face. The circus was over, and we had won. When I thought it was all over, that Vanessa's case was just a story to tell at the next holiday cookout, the plot twist hit. Not me, not Mia, not even Jay with his conspiracy theories saw it coming. I spent the night reviewing the drone footage, zooming in frame by frame on my laptop, a cup of cold coffee beside me, when I noticed a detail I had missed before. A thick, coal-black cable snaking out of a broken basement window at Vanessa's house, stretching across her yard and disappearing underground near the community's utility pole. This wasn't just any cable, it was robust, with reinforced insulation, the kind designed to handle a heavy load without a hitch. It didn't make sense. Tyler, with his clumsy hands and teenage brain obsessed with ATVs, could never have rigged something like this. I called the Pacific Power technician back the next day, nearly dropping my phone from the rush of adrenaline. He arrived with a shovel, a current detector, and the look of a man who had seen it all. But even he wasn't ready for what came next. The guy dug near the pole, dirt flying like a scene out of a treasure hunt, until he hit something solid. "Bingo," he said, pulling up a thick black cable that looked like a rogue electrical artery. He traced the line with his multimeter, the beeps echoing in the quiet morning, and confirmed. A direct bypass from the main power grid, set up with professional grade. Connectors, clean soldering, high-voltage electrical tape, the kind of work that required someone with rubber gloves and an electrician's certification, not a 15-year-old kid with a makeshift charger. Vanessa had help, and it wasn't amateur. "This is pro-level stuff," the technician murmured, scratching his beard while snapping photos for the report. "Could be an underground electrician, someone who knows how to bypass the system without tripping the company's alarms." My stomach twisted. The Vanessa circus was bigger than we had imagined, and now there was a villain lurking in the shadows. At the emergency HOA meeting on a humid Thursday night, we confronted her with everything we had. The community hall was packed, chairs creaking, neighbors whispering, the air thick with anticipation. The technician stepped onto the makeshift stage, holding up the severed cable like a murder weapon, and laid out the numbers. The underground bypass had drained over $90,000 worth of electricity from the public grid over 2 years, a hole in our pockets that she had dug. Vanessa, sitting in the front row in the same hot pink robe, her face twisted like she had bitten into a lemon, shot up from her chair, pointing fingers at everyone. "You're slandering me. This is a neighborhood conspiracy to ruin me. I'm the victim here." But the technician turned on the projector, and the evidence rolled onto the screen. Her voice on tape, bragging at the party, the laughter and clinking. Glasses in the background, the videos of Tyler plugging in cables and frying the grass in Mia's yard, and now the photos of the underground cable, time-stamped and measured, proof that left no room for doubt. She tried to shout over the presentation, her voice cracking like a badly tuned radio. "This is fake. I don't know anything about electricity." But Jay, holding the remote like it was a weapon, laughed out loud. "You don't, huh? Then who welded this monster to the utility pole? Santa Claus." Mia slammed the table, nearly knocking over someone's coffee. "You should have used all that energy to bake a decent cake, you thief." Sarah recorded everything on her phone, whispering narration for the next episode of her podcast, while Mike shook his head, muttering, "My fountains will never forgive this." The technician delivered the final blow. Pacific Power already handed this over to the police. This is large-scale electricity fraud. Silence lasted half a second before the bomb went off. Someone called the police right then and there. 2 officers walked in through the back door, their badges flashing under the fluorescent lights. Vanessa completely lost it. She stormed out of the hall, kicking over a plastic plant at the door in a clumsy tantrum and nearly tripping over her own robe, which dragged behind her like the train of a dethroned queen. The entire neighborhood erupted in applause, a roar that spilled through the open windows and set off a chorus of barking dogs. The officers took her to the station for questioning, and rumor has it they're now investigating an electrician who worked in the area, a guy who vanished off the grid as soon as the case blew up. Vanessa is now facing criminal charges for electricity fraud, with a possible prison sentence if her mystery accomplice is caught. Tyler's ATV still sits in the yard, a rusting relic under the tarp, while we toasted our victory with cold beer on Mia's porch. The circus was finally over, but the neighborhood would never be the same, and for the first time in months the lights stopped flickering.